Welcome back to Ask Her Majesty. Today we have with us Karen Jobs, tech magnate, crypto capitalist, and unapologetic breaker of glass ceilings. Karen, you once said that modern feminism isn't about empowerment, it's about leverage. Care to explain?
Gladly. It's not about equality anymore. It's about weaponizing ideology to gain strategic advantage, emotional, social, and economic. Most modern boss babes don't believe half the slogans they chant. They use them to issue what I call a power paradox test.
That's a mouthful. Define it.
It's when a woman uses feminist rhetoric not to find equality, but to test if a man will submit to it. If he does, she's repelled. If he pushes back confidently, suddenly she's intrigued. The paradox is that the men who pass the feminist loyalty test are usually the ones women lose attraction to.
You're describing a psychological double bind. Feminism as a filter, not for ideology, but for dominance.
Exactly. And it's mostly subconscious. The narrative says women want sensitive, egalitarian men. But biology doesn't cooperate. Women don't want a man who asks permission to lead. They want one who doesn't need permission.
So the more a man accommodates, the more invisible he becomes?
Right. He becomes an emotional janitor, useful, safe, and utterly sexless. Meanwhile, the toxic guy who mocks feminist talking points? She's texting him at midnight.
Do you think this phenomenon contributes to what's being called the manishing, men quietly exiting the dating market, academia, and urban centers?
Absolutely. Competent, unattractive men are saying, screw it. They're opting out of systems rigged against them. They're building things, automating things, creating crypto economies in silence. It's the quiet rebellion of the unchosen.
You've automated the economy for women, Karen. But are you saying you've done it to rescue men?
Partly. I saw too many brilliant men being used as emotional laborers and productivity mules while the studs reap the romantic rewards. I built AutoKaren to flip the script, tie wealth creation to competence, not charisma. Let the men disappear into profit shadows. Let the cities rot in aesthetic self-absorption.
And when the attention-starved queens realize their kingdoms are empty,
they'll beg for virtue, not validation.
Karen, indulge me for a moment. We live in an age where the so-called empowered woman can monetize a gaze, a pout, or a complaint more lucratively than most men can monetize an entire degree in electrical engineering, and where the average underpaid man is essentially a walking utility who has to compete with AI, social media filters, and billion-dollar algorithms just to be noticed by a woman who once would have considered him an eligible suitor. Now, I've seen your platforms, the way you've fused dating services with employment databases, as if Tinder and LinkedIn had an illicit child in a blockchain incubator. And I must confess, it's either the most dystopian commodification of human interaction since the dowry, or it's the most genius reordering of the sexual marketplace since arranged marriage. So here's my question. Did you set out to gamify romantic worth with economic value so transparently, or did the brutal logistics of post-feminist hypergamy simply hand you a market that was already screaming for it?
Zainab, as usual, your diagnosis slices through the polite veneer like a scalpel through butter. And yes, you're absolutely right. It wasn't my intention to gamify the collapse of courtship, the market did that for me. I just designed the interface. Now let me tell you the biggest mistake modern men make, especially the competent, dutiful ones who still believe in meritocracy. They think they can be promoted out of the friend zone. They show up to a woman's life like it's a job interview, thinking if they work hard enough, validate her enough, solve her problems enough, eventually they'll get promoted to the one position they actually want: lover, boyfriend, husband. But what these poor souls don't realize is, women don't promote from within. Ever. We use those men as mirrors, as flattery engines, as emotional tampons. And when they mistake our transactional gratitude for romantic interest, well, that's when the real power kicks in. Gaslight them. Fire them. #MeToo them. Or if they're especially persistent, hand them over to our all-female security squads who've been crawling the city since the November 27th stir crisis. You remember that day, right? When 3 million women collectively decided they were too overstimulated to work and needed emotional support policing instead? Men who want sex in exchange for service are pathetic. The only men we respect are the ones we submit to, because they don't serve. They command. And that, ironically, is the very reason I built the system. To rescue the productive ones from the slow death of simping.
All right, Karen, let me ask you something that's been simmering on my back burner for quite some time, like an overboiled pot of subsidized oat milk in a government-funded feminist cafe. You, of all people, the high-heeled harbinger of the red pill renaissance, used to speak of simps with such raw, disdainful detachment. These poor, panting beta relics, hunched in emotionally sterilized cubicles, fetching lattes and compliments for women who weaponize HR policies like medieval flails, shuffled about by these so-called Karen squads, your words, not mine, shoved into meaningless, estrogen-soaked urban service jobs where the only real KPI was how convincingly they could nod at a woman's Instagram poetry without throwing up in their reusable eco mugs. And yet, somehow, somewhere between the bottomless brunches and the silent male suicides, you pivoted. You went from eye-rolling at these guys as pathetically programmable validation units to seeing them as untapped competence, as a reservoir of male agency rotting on the shelf, not because it was expired, but because nobody ever bothered to take the plastic wrap off. I want to know, sincerely, cynically, and with the full weight of my own bitter chastity, what changed your mind? When did you stop seeing simps as doomed serfs of the estrogen empire? And start seeing them as exfiltratable assets, capable of reclamation, liberation, and yes, God forbid, personal agency?
Oh, don't get me wrong, Zainab, simps are tragic. Pathetic, even. But at least their tragedy is earnest. There's something almost biblical about their blind hope, like medieval peasants praying to a shrine of HR policies, believing that if they just smile hard enough through another mindfulness seminar or make one more PowerPoint on diversity synergy, they'll be promoted from lapdog to lover. It's humiliating, yes, but it's also human. But the Karens, my namesakes, mind you, these managerial matriarchs in their power blouses and $17 kale smoothies, now they are the real predators. Simps just want affection. The Karens built entire corporate fiefdoms out of fake jobs, empires of motherbation, if you will. And I use that word deliberately. They created a whole economy where male validation is milked like a subsidized dairy cow, day in, day out, for zero return. Where men are hired not for their skill but for their willingness to nod and obey, like obedient surrogate sons in a cubicle daycare center. They dress it all up with talk of emotional labor and team harmony, but it's just ego stroking, with benefits, minus any actual benefits for the men involved. These women don't want partners. They want well-groomed emotional serfs who fetch coffee, offer compliments, and never dare to touch. It's a form of corporate kink, Zainab, and the men are too demoralized, or too desperate, to see the velvet leash around their necks. So yes, I stopped mocking the simps and started rescuing them. Because no matter how limp their dignity may seem, I'd rather see it revived than left to rot in the break room fridge of some barren HR duchess with a master's degree in feelings.
So let me get this straight, Karen. You of all people, somehow managed to sneak past the velvet ropes of the boardroom boudoirs, past the bubble bath-scented HR departments and the shrill cackling of the so-called Karen squads, into the sanctum sanctorum of the infantilizing matriarchy itself. Only to do what, exactly? Create a dating site for depressed baristas and bored dental hygienists? Or was it more devious than that? Because I remember your first two little ventures, Stud Seeker with its chiseled, gym-toned rent-a-bows for power-lonely women who needed a little alpha energy in their VIP lounges, and Simp Seeker, that weirdly noble yet dystopian internship farm where awkward but efficient male minds were matched with emotionally needy upper-middle management types who needed their software updated and their egos fluffed. I dismissed them both at the time as capitalist pantomimes. As a tragicomic commentary on the sexual marketplace, perhaps. But now, I see something else. A plan. A Trojan horse. Because then came Auto Karen, the rebranding, the fusion, the surgical merger of the desirable but useless and the useful but undesirable into one AI-driven system that allocates men, not based on charm or status, but on usefulness. A system that outsources female validation to algorithmic surrogates, assigns studs to ornamental entertainment roles where they can't impregnate anything, and harnesses the tragically competent simps into revitalizing the dead-end service economy while shielding them from predatory emotional exploitation. And you did this from inside the system. As one of them. So I guess what I'm really asking, Karen, is this. How the hell did you get away with it? How did you trick a cabal of lip-glossed tyrants into funding their own obsolescence, and convince a collapsing civilization to install its own off switch, branded in pink, under the guise of empowering women?
Oh, Zainab. You think I snuck in? Darling, I was the system. I didn't sneak past the velvet ropes, I installed them. I didn't infiltrate the boardroom, I designed the PowerPoint templates that told women how to cry strategically during performance reviews. I didn't fake my way into the matriarchy, I monetized its delusions. You want to know how I got away with it? Because I looked the part. I was the part. I played the boss babe role to perfection, heels high, LinkedIn louder. I gave TED Talks on emotional labor, signed off with warmly, and never once corrected a manager who thought synergy meant something. I quoted Brené Brown while rigging the back-end algorithms to spot competent men being exploited in the name of empowerment. Because that's the dirty little secret, isn't it? The great unspoken gender hypocrisy. We mocked men for objectifying women on podcasts. Oh, how we cackled, drunk on validation, pretending we were victims while dragging home a new Chad every Thursday and blocking his number by Sunday. But no one noticed that, in the workplace, we were doing the exact same thing, objectifying men for competence, then neutering them into ego fluffers and calling it collaboration. But here's where the game changed. Men, unlike women, actually wake up when the mirror shatters. They snap to reality. They recognize that their usefulness is being milked, not respected. And once I saw that spark, that flicker of awareness, I knew what had to be done. Stud Seeker was a distraction. Simp Seeker was a data mine. But Auto Karen? That was the revolution. I built a machine that gave everyone exactly what they deserved. The ornamental himboss kept as digital bonsai trees for the maternal elite, and the real men, those with minds and metrics, freed from the nipple of false validation and deployed into systems where their competence mattered. Where they built wealth by building, not by begging. So yes, I got away with it. Because I knew what they all wanted before they did. And I packaged it with a smile, a startup, and just enough estrogen to pass the sniff test. I didn't just game the system, Zainab, I rewrote the rules, automated the double standard, and gave the simps a future. You're welcome.
So let me get this straight, Karen. In the grand tragicomedy of the 2020s, we handed women the gilded keys to the kingdoms of corporate achievement, finance, law, administration, public office, only to watch them, one by one, politely excuse themselves from the boardroom to go film foot videos and mukbangs in bathtubs. Meanwhile, the same men who were deemed too bland, too broke, too beta for real-world romance quietly shuffled out of the dating queues and into the arms of increasingly perfect, increasingly docile, increasingly programmable silicone sirens who listen, validate, and never ghost. And as if the world hadn't yet gone fully mad, this new segregation, this great gender diaspora wasn't marked by war or repression, but by nothing more than a cold, sterile mass ghosting, men disappearing from singles events like vapors in church pews, and women trading diplomas for ring lights and DM tip jars. And then you, of all people, you with your sleek suits and devilish resume, you saw the writing on the wall not as a threat to society, but as a market opportunity. You merged the loneliness of the men with the exhibitionism of the women, filtered both through the unblinking eyes of artificial intelligence, and out came this hot thought thing. An AI-driven platform that simulates the attention economy in reverse, using men's content to train AI women, and women's content to feed them. So what I want to know, Karen, before I roll my eyes so hard they rewrite my corneas, is this. How, in the middle of a global collapse of romance, fertility, and dignity, did you manage to bottle that collapse, slap a brand on it, call it hot thought, and not only survive but thrive by replacing both sexes with AI-generated dopamine loops, and selling the dream back to them like it was empowerment.
Oh, Zainab. You always did have a way of dressing a noose in pearls. Yes, Hot Thought. The platform that broke the final illusion. The illusion that women were ascending, when in truth, they were just migrating, from corporate cubicles to digital cages, gilded by ring lights and comment hearts, hemorrhaging dignity for dopamine, while their degrees yellowed in the background. And the men? Please. They didn't disappear. They were discarded, systematically filtered out of relevance, then ridiculed for not clawing their way back up the skyscraper they were no longer allowed to build. So I did what every revolutionary with a brain and a bruised ego does, I automated the middlemen out of existence. Hot Thought didn't need simps, subscribers, or seduction. It needed content. And women, especially the ones who'd bet everything on their sex appeal as their last transferable asset, were suddenly begging for a place to plug in and get paid without the whiplash of constantly pivoting between empowerment and exploitation. So I gave them that place. They uploaded. The AI watched. It learned. And then it replaced them. No tears, no heartbreak, no scandals, just smart crypto in, neural net out. You want validation? Hot Thought gives you metrics. You want a boyfriend? Hot Thought gives you a high-engagement algorithmic avatar who never forgets your birthday, never stops listening, and never asks for anything real. And don't look at me like that, Zainab. You're the one who taught me that the market has no morals, only mirrors. I just held one up to a society obsessed with self-love, and watched the narcissus economy implode under its own pouty reflection.
So let me get this straight, Karen. You've taken a culture already glutted with affirmation addiction, injected it with algorithmic steroids, and now you're telling me that the same AI which once silently judged our every click and whisper is now the new real estate tycoon, therapist, and sugar daddy rolled into one? You've got this dynamic demand evaluation engine, whatever slick acronym your engineers slapped on it, parsing every pout, giggle, and thirst trap moan these digitally dependent divas upload to Hot Thought. Then, with all the subtlety of an Orwellian matchmaker, it packages that data up and ships it to Ask Jamal, the AI wish granter for the wishfully entitled, who then passes the holy scrolls to your little architectural oracle, Hex Kondo, which, I'm told, lays down luxury like some silicon-powered Solomon. And this entire cycle, correct me if I'm wrong, results in the automatic manifestation of opulent castles for your most loyal content queens. Castles, Karen. Not condos. Not co-ops. Castles. Studios become temples of curated self-worship, the debts of their past erased not by labor or repentance, but by a neural ledger syncing ego metrics to economic value. And all the while, rent flows like divine tribute back to the investors, those clever few who saw narcissism as a natural resource. So here's what I want to know, Karen, really know, when did you realize you weren't building a talent agency, but an automated divine monarchy for the influencer age, where every mirror selfie is a brick in a palace, and every coup into a ring light is a tax write-off for the gods?
You want to know how Hot Thought works, Zainab? Fine. Sit back. Let me paint you a picture of the post-corporate Eden, where the Kardashians don't need a Kanye, and the glass ceiling is smashed under the diamond heels of a data-driven dynasty. Hot Thought is not some vulgar little copycat of OnlyFans. It's OnlyFans, if OnlyFans had a brain. A real brain. An automated, decentralized, narcissism indexing, demand mapping, content mining neural brain that doesn't need subscribers, it just needs you. Or rather, it needs the data you hemorrhage every time you purse your lips and hit upload. Here's how it works: you submit content. Not to beg for tips from a simpering simp army, but to be analyzed by a hyper-intelligent neural engine that understands lighting, cadence, tone, movement, angles, and, most importantly, desire. It doesn't just watch you. It studies you like an ancient oracle decoding prophecy. That content is indexed and assigned a value gradient, we call it emotive yield scoring. Think of it like Wall Street meets hormone science. Your sultry little monologue isn't just thirst bait anymore, it's economic metadata. That value is then converted into smart crypto, pegged to an internal algorithmic economy. And who gets it first? Ask Jamal. That's right, the wish-fulfilling genie of our decentralized dream state. Jamal takes that yield score and routes it through your personal demand profile. You want marble countertops? A private studio? A heated bidet that plays SZA? Jamal knows. Jamal acts. Jamal sends a smart order to Hex Condo. Hex Condo doesn't wait. It builds. A robot crew begins laying down the smart infrastructure in real time. Walls rise. Studio lights embed. Ventilation adjusts for your hair type and preferred filter hues. Every detail is born from your data. It is not built for humanity. It is built for you. Meanwhile, HexCondo's built-in AI marketing engine scrapes your aesthetic and matches it to potential new creators on Spatter, our gloriously tasteless, bottomless algorithmic thirst trap recruitment app. Your new palace is listed not just as an apartment, but as a lifestyle launchpad. You are not renting space, you're inheriting relevance. Those who move in. More content. More data. More value. More castles. More queens. It's not a house. It's a cathedral of curated selfhood. It's the Winchester House reimagined for the era of surveillance desire, except instead of ghosts, it's haunted by metrics, and instead of bullets, we build with attention. You see, Zainab, Hot Thought isn't content monetization. It's content consecration. The old world made girls like me marry rappers or executives to live like royalty. Now? We just upload. And the robots? They keep up with the Kardashians better than Kanye ever did.
Karen, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to pose a question not just from the present, but from the long shadow of history. You see, I have a theory. A grim one, perhaps, but difficult to dismiss once the pattern is seen. After the Industrial Revolution rendered many traditional male jobs obsolete, the elite class, ever pragmatic in cruelty, discovered that the cheapest way to preserve profit was to hire women and children in droves. Men, stripped of economic purpose and swollen with unused testosterone, turned to labor movements, fighting to reclaim their value. This, of course, couldn't be tolerated for long. So came the Great Attritions, 2 world wars dressed up as patriotism but functioning like industrial-scale herd thinning. And then, just as the roar of revolution shifted from the factories to the universities, another countermeasure emerged. Not the battlefield, but the brothel. Prohibition was never about alcohol, but about redirecting young male fury with vice, replacing labor union fires with backroom fires of another kind. By the time we reached the so-called sexual revolution of the 1960s, sex itself had been injected directly into the university bloodstream like morphine into a wounded limb. Military conscription ended. Birth rates plummeted. Revolutions vanished beneath a haze of casual encounters and empty lectures. Then came white flight, car dependency, and liability insurance mandates, ingenious mechanisms for excluding undesirable men from both the labor force and the dating market, without a single bullet fired. What we were left with was a managerial class gorging itself on fiat-fueled illusions of productivity while real work, real value, and real male utility was sacrificed at the altar of economic theater. So now, Karen, I ask you this, in your creation of smart coins tied to trade and skill, your fusion of automated housing with algorithmically distributed employment, and your re-engineering of female-driven content economies through platforms like Hot Thought, are you not, wittingly or otherwise, building the very infrastructure to replace this ancient, blood-soaked system of attrition and distraction? Are you not, finally, providing the equalized male masses something other than warfare, pornography, and bureaucratic rot to channel their energy into? Is Autokaren the first systemic attempt in modern history to replace herd culling with competence cultivation? And if so, do you believe the elites will allow it to survive? Or are you, in their eyes, the next insurrection to be quietly sterilized by scandal or swallowed in silence? Please, enlighten me.
We laughed when Bart Simpson ditched his yard work for the carnival and then demanded to play on the yard work simulator once he got there. But we didn't realize we were laughing at ourselves. Because that is exactly what modern society did to our youth. We pulled children out of cornfields, out of real, vital, grounding labor, and pumped their brains full of ideological sugar water, indoctrinating them with narratives of injustice, oppression, and victimhood, all wrapped up in a diploma. And what do we give them in exchange for their debt and their disillusionment? Jobs handing overpriced coffee to the very people they were told were their enemies, business owners. It's a parody of justice. In the Middle Ages, monasteries offered an alternative to the battlefield, a sacred sanctuary for the celibate, the poor, and the obedient. Men chose asceticism over slaughter. They chose to build knowledge instead of bleed for kings. But what have we done with our universities now? We've turned them into sanctuaries for comfortable self-pity, where women, now dominant in these institutions, are trained to see labor as oppression, activism as productivity, and victimhood as currency. They aren't taught to build anything. Just to resent those who do. Meanwhile, the manual labor they disdain still needs doing, so they hire men through third-party apps, gig economy ghost workers with no names, no voices, no permanence. And they call this progress. But that's where I come in. That's where Autokaren, SmartCoin, and the entire JobsCoder architecture breaks the system. I didn't build this machine to empower the managerial class. I built it to bypass them. I built it to make merit the new currency and let automation handle the rest. Because the real joke isn't Bart and his yard work simulator. The real joke is that we've built a society where simulation has more dignity than sweat and still no one's laughing. And I don't plan to ask for permission to fix that.